Hello, everybody. So we're up to week 7 now of 8, getting really close to the end. We're looking at a lot of stuff here, right? We started off by looking at hardware, physical devices, and then we talked about our data, the stuff we want the hardware to store and manipulate, move around. That led into software, the automated process of data and controlling the hardware, accessing internal stuff so we can control the machine. Look at networks so we can connect a bunch of them together, a bunch of computers together, get more functionality than one alone. Like the old adage, strength in numbers. Lots of computers together can do more than one computer alone can. Then we looked at cybersecurity, keeping that stuff safe, just some basic tenets. And this week, the next thing on tap is all that stuff nice, all those parts go together really well and stuff, but if something goes wrong, it goes wrong across the board, right? There's no isolation, there's nothing little compartmentalizing it. So this week we're going to look at virtualization. And the short version of this is we're going to make a fake machine to run our real machine. So like I have this Windows laptop here. So it's the Windows operating system accessing the hardware, it's just that one layer deep. If I added another layer of a virtual machine, which is basically a software-oriented fake machine sitting there, and then that's what I interact with. The physical hardware itself and the main operating system is safe underneath that. And if something goes wrong, I can just delete that fake machine and put a new one on. That's the short version of what virtualization is. It extends our capabilities quite a bit, but the big thing is it's like a virtual machine is kind of like a fake machine. So then our real machine, the main operating system, direct access to all the physical components and stuff, that is safe because we're working on a fake machine the whole time. If something goes wrong, we just hit the delete button and put a new fake machine on there. And then the real one stays safe. It's also really useful for networks, like this computer lab here. He didn't go through and configure every one of these computers. He set up one virtual machine, and then he just pushed that virtual machine out to every computer. That's why they all have the same setup, the same software running on them, all the same configurations. And this lab, and then in 162 around the corner. The cybersecurity lab has a different setup. It's the same thing. He just did one machine and then pushed it out to one virtual machine and pushed it out to all the physical machines at once. And if something goes wrong, they can just fix it on that one instance and push it out to everything again. I should write names down before I forget to do so. All right, there we go. So that's what we're looking at this week. Traditionally, it's a fully isolated thing. Virtual machine is completely separated, but recently, like pretty much within the last 2 years, 3 years, if you go back to like when beta testers were using it, Windows extended functionality by taking basically virtual machines and extending them as a network. So that on this one Windows machine, we can network it. It's like we have a network of our machine and then some virtual machines as well. It's called a subsystem. And unlike a traditional virtual machine, it's not completely separated in its own little isolated box. We can still access it just like they're different machines on the same network. Adds a lot of functionality to them, so I'm going to look at that. Then we're going to look at creating virtual machines in the traditional sense. And then what we call the cloud, a lot of times that's generically referred to just anything running on the internet. But there is something, cloud does mean something specific, and that has to do with virtualization. So we'll look at what virtualization or what the cloud is in terms of virtualization, probably Wednesday. you should have got an email about joining an AWS Academy class. Actually, I put it in the wrong course at first. They, the one I put it in at first just has some basic functionality, introductory functionality. And I wanted to use what they call a sandbox, just a little environment that's safe to just experiment freely in. And the one I added the roster to at first didn't have the sandbox. So I had to go back and add to another one. And the names are odd. If you enroll in both courses in Wall Prairie on Tuesday, you'll see which one will go in. Yeah, actually, if you enroll in both of them, you'll notice one of them, if you go to modules, has 3 things in there. And the other one has like 8 different modules with 10 assignments each. We want the bigger one, the full size one. And then we'll kind of walk through some cloud stuff, probably do that in class and make that another one that's worth points. So follow along and just follow along the class and send me some screenshots to show you you're doing some stuff. Get some points for that. That'll be Wednesday. So first off today, let's look at this new Windows Subsystem for Linux thing. It's really, really useful if you have a Windows machine and to have these alternate machines running on it. Probably should have turned it off on my machine so we could do it from scratch today. So there's a couple ways to do it. I'm going to go here first. We're not going to use this one, just show this. If you search for turn Windows features on and off, you know these checkboxes, the Windows features that weren't turned on, that just weren't on. They were available, but they were turned off when you got your machine. One of the ones on the checkbox here just doesn't scroll right. I always forget that. If we scroll way down, down near the bottom, should see Windows Subsystem for Linux. Oh, there it is. Windows Subsystem for Linux. So you can just hit that checkbox. If you go in this way, you have to restart your machine. So there's a better way that doesn't necessarily require a machine. So we hit that checkbox, and there are some other ones that are nice to turn on while you're there. Hypervisor is kind of nice. I turned it off for something else that I'm doing. That's graphics acceleration. Kind of predates when every computer had GPU. I'm on the cheapest laptop at Walmart. Like I went in Walmart 6 o'clock in the morning, got the manager, and just did say I need the cheapest laptop that runs Windows. And it has a GPU on it. So cheapest one at Walmart comes not a big GPU, I think 4 gig. Cheapest laptop at Walmart has a small GPU, has some GPUs. So we have middleware. So hypervisor is graphics and then background stuff is processed differently. So it makes some adjustments so that a CPU can process graphics better. I haven't turned off. It's not as important as it once was. We can also do that from PowerShell. We saw PowerShell a couple times. We have Windows X, get to all of our operating system control tools, and on there is Terminal. So it took off really, really well. It's only been around for a couple of years, and people really, really liked it. So they went ahead and upgraded it from that background box where we have to turn it on and then it'll automatically change stuff in the BIOS. So we can just do it from a command now. And the command is just WSL for Windows Subsystem for Linux, and then -- install. It's already on mine, but when you do that, that will come down with a Ubuntu machine. Oh, it's going slow. I have a different Ubuntu machine. I hope it didn't overwrite that. Notice how the terminal changed now. So it's showing a Linux operating system. On individual computers, the ones we interact with, Microsoft Windows is by far the most popular operating system, the one we see most often. But all of the servers on networks connecting them run Linux software. Linux comes about from in the early days of computing, like through most of the 60s and the 70s, they were working on the main experimental operating system was called Unix. That was used we still hear that term, but it was very proprietary. It was very expensive. It was very expensive to do anything out of it. And people didn't really like that. So, starting in the mid 1990s, somebody wrote a different version of that. His name was Linus Torvalds, and he didn't like the cost of it. He was a big fan of open source software, which one thing a lot of people like about that is free. But the other aspect of that, as it applies to the people sitting in this room, is open source. We can grab the source code and change it to fit our needs. We don't have to adapt what we're doing to fit the software. We can modify the software to fit our needs. So he did that with a version of the operating system, named it after himself, but called it Linux instead of Unix. And really, the world runs on Unix. You rarely see Windows on the server anymore. A lot of people like it. We have more direct control. There's nothing locked down in the background. There's no arbitrary things. The human has complete control over it. So a lot of people, technology experts, kind of prefer Linux. You will definitely see it if you're heading in IT. So you're going to want to get some practice with it. And Windows Subsystem for Linux is a good way to get some practice with it. But exit, get back to PowerShell. So WSL install, oops, brings that in, just turns it on. That's all you have to do, and it puts an Ubuntu system on there right off the bat, so you can start using Ubuntu on your Windows system. You do WSL upgrade. Often a good idea to check for updates, just like on your regular computer. Windows WSL upgrade will bring everything up to the latest version. And when you have that on, you can go to the Windows Store and choose choose Linux systems, or Microsoft Store. That's what it's called. It's right there on the screen in front of me. I've been talking since 9 o'clock straight this morning. But if we go to the Microsoft Store and just search for Linux, there are a bunch of installs of this. If you want to, you can go to the Microsoft Store if you just prefer to install stuff that way. And this top search for Linux, and this top one is all of the activate and upgrade, and get some configuration, some nice configuration set right off the bat. You just click that and install it like with any software, and it sets everything up. Or Ubuntu, several versions of Ubuntu, Kali Linux, I have those. We can have several of them on there. There are lots of versions of Linux, that open source thing. People aren't stuck with what, like Microsoft Windows. We're not stuck with what Microsoft gave us. With Linux, we have complete control over everything. So there are lots and lots of versions of it. Let's pull up a picture. Linux distros. So they use the word distros for the different ones. The list would go on and on and on. 42 more rows just on the short list of Google results at the top. And that's not even extensive. If we look at images, here it is. So here's the diagram of Linux. It won't even really fit in one picture. I open up that in a new tab. Oh, that. It's the image. Open the image in a new tab. And small. So not the clearest version, but way down at the bottom left there was eventually just one version that he created. But it was open source. So somebody took that and they made a slightly different version, and it keeps branching off. And this is just a small little corner of the overall picture. You can see how many different ones there are. You can install any of those and use it as a starting point. Use it as your own starting point to branch off and make your own operating system. It would get drawn on a diagram like this if you put it back on GitHub or something where everybody else in the world can share it and then use the version you created. Really shines for open source software, but there's lots and lots of versions. So you may head into cybersecurity. I don't think there's many cybersecurity people in this class. Okay. So Kali is kind of specific for cybersecurity software. I was going to install that when we look at the traditional virtual machines, because your lab this week is to install an Ubuntu virtual machine. I didn't want to go through the exact one. Start off with Linux, probably go with Ubuntu. That's if you're used to Windows, everything in Ubuntu is going to seem very familiar. A couple of buttons are in a different place, or might be labeled slightly different, but you can still tell what the button does, even with the different labeling on Ubuntu. A lot of the buttons are still in the same place, so it's a really good way for people familiar with Windows to get started into Linux. Kali Linux is optimized for penetration testing. Sorry, ethical hacking. Talked about that some last week. Has a lot of tools on there for tracking passwords, tracking what's going on in the network, all of that stuff. So I would highly, highly recommend looking into the WSL, the Windows Subsystem for Linux. To put it on your computer, whoops, I didn't mean to close that. I'll try that again. I push Windows X and I to get to the terminal. That's Windows X, and then the I is WSL --install. And at that point, you will have a small, lightweight Ubuntu system running on your machine, which if you have the Windows terminal, the one with the tabs up here like I have, one of those tabs will be Ubuntu. So you can just open that up and you don't necessarily have to navigate into it from the other one. Whenever we install it, first thing we always want to do is check for updates on it, because some of the Linux machines, they might have been sitting there on a server on the internet somewhere for a while. Got a little behind on updates. This is in your thing. Sudo is a common word we'll use. That stands for super user do, and whatever we type afterwards. But it's our administrative privileges without actually changing to an administrative role, which we call root, without actually switching to full unrestricted access on the machine, which is another thing. Some of what's locked down in Windows protects the computer from us, but that doesn't happen in Linux machines. We have full access to everything, so we can. It's really easy to break stuff. That's why it's really good on virtual machines. Get familiar with it on a virtual machine where you have it delete, where you can delete it. Sudo, and then app is a place that this is the application that goes and looks for things to install, all the packages. I think that stands for application package something. I've looked it up before. I can't remember what it stands for. But it's one of the ones. There's also Yum. There's several different versions, but that's what we would use to check for applications. So update, and then that'll check for any updates that are out there. And about 29 packages can be upgraded. So hit clear, then sudo app upgrade. We're going to do that first thing we're on the Linux machine. So check for updates. There's a bunch out there. So yes, go ahead and run those updates. That's one of the things in the lab. You'll just run through a few. We all see the labs by now, right? A bunch of step-by-step instructions, pictures. All the pictures we're taking on the remote access machines that are in that closet in the back of the room here. So it will work with the GRE remote access. Just log in those machines. But if you're heading into IT, having some virtual machines on your own computer is really, really useful. So Windows Subsystem for Linux is incredibly useful. I would highly recommend getting started looking at that, kind of getting familiar with Linux systems. So you can run lots of them. Windows XI. It does count as a network. Could I be config? So like here, y'all can see there's definitely not an Ethernet port going into my laptop. It's a power port in the USB for the pin. It's the only thing plugged in right now, but it thinks there's an Ethernet there. And it has this address, 172.28. Some other stuff. And if I go over to one of those Linux machines, like Kali Linux, and look for the IP address, but that's gonna give a lot, so I'm gonna bubble that down. Grep is filtered with what's called regular expressions. It's pattern matching, regular expression pattern. And I want to match a pattern. In this case, I'm just gonna put in the words. Like, look for anything that matches that word, so I don't have a screen full of information. I only have like 30 lines this way. And we can see that same address, 172.28, and something different than what this one is. This one's got 224. This one's got 230. So the machine, Windows Subsystem for Linux, they're networked together already. LS is the command for listing things out in Linux, list out the directory. ls-l will tell you like what permissions you have on the file, a little bit more information. ls-a will show hidden folders as well, hidden files and folders. The ls is what lists out the directory. You'll see a couple of these in the lab, but if I do ls/mnp, that stands for mount, like a mounted hard drive. So on my WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, here's the drive for that. Obviously has like a computer, it has its own computer, own drive. It also has the C drive, and also has the G drive, that's my Google Drive. So I use Google Drive instead of OneDrive. I regularly break my computer. Like earlier this year, there was a change in Windows 11 that was messing up something with some pre-configured virtual machines that have been around for a while. Virtual web host servers that people use for test environments, and nobody knew how to fix it. And Microsoft didn't bother telling anybody exactly what change they made, so people could figure out how to fix it. I've been using Windows since the early 90s, the early versions of Windows. So all kinds of forums were filled up with people having questions, and nobody had the answer. So 2 or 3 times a week in the spring, I was breaking my computer looking for the answer. Because all the forums were filling up and nobody knew what to do. And a whole lot of people, I guess we're reaching the point now that a whole lot of people have done their entire education just Googling it. So they weren't sure what to do with it except post it in the forum. They'd already posted it in the forum. So I do know how to dig through there and find all the stuff. So every couple of days, I was breaking my machine every couple of days. And OneDrive will back up those. OneDrive backs up the configurations automatically. So when I would break the machine, OneDrive would back that up and keep it with my Microsoft account so that there's no undoing it after that either. So I use Google Drive for the file storage built in. But I have access to those, so I can change directory into the mounted drive and my C drive, users, and then my Microsoft account here, go to the documents folder this one. And the Linux machine has access to the Windows machine, and the Windows machine has access to the Linux machine, just like on the network. So that point I mentioned about a virtual machine or a fake machine that keeps us safe, we don't have that with a subsystem. Subsystems can fully access each other. So it is kind of missing there, but a really useful thing, because then you get Linux functionality on a Windows machine. It's kind of useful to have. The big thing today is traditional virtual machines. So I'm going to try to draw a little picture here. So there's that stuff we've talked about so far, our computer. I'll just represent it with the big box here. So we have our computer, physical device, the hardware components. And on that, we have the software controlling everything. I'll put operating system. And so the operating system is the thing that can like reach out and access our CPU. Or there and control our access our cooling fan. That doesn't look like a fan. computer starts to get hot, the operating system is what keeps track of the temperature. And then tells the fan when to come on, come off, check our battery. Tell when it's getting low and all that physical hardware there. Then we have the software running things, and what we've been doing is just interacting right on this, right? We have some sort of app here, another app here, but they're at that top layer. So they're not very far away from that stuff. If things go wrong, an error here could leak over into something more important, like the connection to the battery on a laptop. So a virtual machine, I'll try color coding it. Red. A virtual machine is like an app. I'm gonna write VM. Hopefully it's obvious what that acronym stands for, right? Our virtual machine, which is a mouthful, so we usually say VM. And then in that, it's a fake operating system put here. You think of that. Think of it that way, a fake operating system. And then we can run our apps in here. And leakage is kind of like locked in that box. If something goes wrong with this app, it can't escape outside of the virtual machine and leak back into the hardware, or really even leak back into the actual operating system. If something goes wrong, we just delete that and put a new one on. And this original operating system, controlling the hardware directly, stays in pristine shape. Like that's how this lab's set up. If something goes wrong on these, you can just, with a couple clicks from over in the other room, you can just delete what's on these machines and push out a new, fix the image of the virtual machine and put that image of an operating system on every machine. That's the idea there. It's an active subject. What am I doing, right? So the lab this week is setting up a virtual machine. So the traditional sense, we would have some operating system to set this off. Like it's a little different than we normally use the term, but you think of it like sandbox. That's a good application. It's locked in the sandbox. You can't, nothing inside the sandbox can escape and do anything outside of the sandbox, or stuff happening outside can't leak in there. Usually we use that term a little bit different, but it still applies. You may have heard that. Shows up a lot in gaming too. That's where I think a lot of people have heard of it. We can set up little sandbox environments in a game, and that way we don't affect like our actual character. And role-playing games is a big one, where you might have been building your character for months or years. You want to try something, but you don't want to risk messing up your character. So you set up a little sandbox, which is just a little fake place to try the new thing. And then if it works, then you do it on your real character. That way you don't mess up something you've been working on for years. But it shows up in a lot of different situations. I think the massive online role-playing games is the reason it leaked into normal English, because those are very, very popular, and we won't have that sandbox protection. So we use this is an app, so I guess I should put a black box around that and write the word app so it matches those other things in the pictures. So we install this app that runs virtual machines, and you see how there's like layers of an onion there, like peels all the layers in an onion. That's a terminology that shows up a lot for usage and on some of the things to deal with them. Onion, word onion shows up a lot because of all the layers in a diagram like this. We have to go through a lot of layers from this app to like mess up the fan and stop the cooling system from working. There's a whole lot of layers of an onion to peel off. So you'll hear the word onion applied in things like that a lot. So we need the app that does that. And two of the most popular are VirtualBox, which is made by Oracle. It's quite popular. We have lots and lots of control over everything. I decided to go with the other most popular one, and like, it's not like some things where like 99% of people use one, and there's second place, like 0.5% is second place. VirtualBox and VMware. If you check every month, it's probably back and forth as far as which one's the most popular. But the two most popular ones, this one gives us full control over everything. But obviously, full control means a lot more for the first step to getting started. So I decided to go with VMware for this class. That's the other most popular one. VMware. VMware gives us all full control, but on VirtualBox, the full control is the default, and then we have to go in and change a bunch of configurations to get to a really easy one. On VMware, it's basically just one click, it's ready to go. On the automated version, and then we have to change configurations to get to the full control version. So I thought this one's a lot easier to get started in the first time. So you'll want to install this software or remote access into the labs. It's installed here. Skip past the ads, and on their actual site, or right down here, we want to look for VM Workstation Player. So they have several versions, kind of like the network thing I was talking about. The one that controls 30 computers is obviously different than the one that you put on your one single computer. So Workstation Player is the one we want for each individual computer. You'll want to look for that, which I think is on their main site. If I go to the main site, get Zoom thumbnails out of the way. Informatics, is it here? It's a long list to look through. So search for VM Workstation, and that'll bring it right up. Put it right there at the top. Under Products / Workstation Pro. There's also a free version, Workstation Player. So make sure you download Workstation Player instead of Pro. It's free for personal usage. And if you want to upgrade to the commercial one later, everything from this one does upgrade directly to the thing, so you don't have any changes. You always want to check license agreements and things like that, because some things are free with restrictions, some things are totally free, some things aren't free, but you can still download them and run them without problems. So you want to, and you don't want to end up in like a copyright infringement issue later. So always check those. Always check the requirement, those legal points about using it. Download for free. I was expecting him to say something here. This one you can run it on your own machine or for as long as it's not profit, as long as you're not profiting from it. If you make money from the thing, you owe them money basically. And then choose a version to download. I don't know where I went to this morning. I saw a different page this morning. VM Workstation Player. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and click this. I thought I did the same search this morning, and I looked at a completely different page when I downloaded it. But as long as we're downloading it somewhere, maybe. This still isn't the same page I looked at earlier. Make sure I'm downloading the right thing. The VMware, I'm just going to search VMware. Maybe I just searched for that this morning. And scroll past the ads, and then there's one right down here. It says Workstation Player. It's purple, so that's probably the one I clicked on this morning. Nope, that's the same page. I guess they've just updated since this morning. So I hit download. Oh, I know what it is. It notices I installed it this morning, so it thinks I want to install a different version. You should go to a page that sees the latest version unless you already have it installed, and if you already have it installed, just use that one. 17, just choose 17, go to downloads. And yeah, it's detecting that it's already on my machine, so it's showing me the options taken out of it. Like, oh, you installed a Linux virtual machine. Do you want to put a virtual machine on that Linux virtual machine? Layers of the onion relates to last week's security thing. The more layers there are, right, each one of those layers could become a firewall, another safety layer, safety precaution between us and other stuff. But you'll just hit download and it brings down an installer, which is probably still in my downloads folder. I'll leave that. Yeah, so it just downloads an installer. I did 17.0.0 this morning. Right. Just run the installer, no surprises there. Is there anything not in default? Oh, the only thing I changed from default was one that you're probably used to changing from default anyway. Yes, you're going to make changes. It'll do this, and it's probably going to try to. I might see something different. So when we click through here, next, oh, change, repair, remove. So I'm seeing something different. Cancel that. The only thing I changed from default was one that you're probably used to changing anyway. That checkbox that says enroll me in the email list or customer satisfaction survey stuff. And y'all probably used to unchecking those boxes anyway. Like, don't click on that. Don't send me emails every day. Uncheck those boxes and everything else. The default was fine. But that's nothing new. Then we need to put software on it. So I'm going to go over. It's on then it'll be under your apps. Way down at the bottom. Probably a lot quicker to search for it. Folder for VMware and Workstation Player 17, which is on the computers here. Everybody wants to just log on to one of the computers and bash them here and do some of this stuff. The first time there's a box that pops up that talks about the free for private use, use it yourself on your own computer, non-commercial use, it's free to use as long as you're not making money on it. But again, make sure you read all that stuff. I put one on here that we can look at, so we'll look at that one in a moment because it'll take a moment. And your lab, for the lab, you're putting on an Ubuntu machine. So we need to, I'm doing a different one here. I'm doing Kali Linux. Anybody handling cybersecurity, that's kind of a preferred one for cybersecurity. Red Hat's pretty popular, Fedora, Mint. There's a long list of them. What was the there was another one I was going to mention that's also quite popular for starting out. I can't remember the list, but you can check out a few different versions, see which ones you like, which ones you don't like. They call them distros. So when you go search, just search for Linux distros, and you can read up on which one of I don't even see the one I'm trying to remember. A long list. Ubuntu is probably a great starting point, unless you're heading into cybersecurity, and then Kali Linux would be. So that's what I'm going to install now. So Kali Linux. So we'll go here. I just searched for Kali Linux, went right to the main page for it. It's a download button. This one, a lot of the Linux distributions will be on this. This confuses people at first because we're putting it on a virtual machine. This is the completed, finished version of the virtual machine. So that's actually harder to use because you have to be able to reconfigure your virtual machine platform to however they set that up. So we want the images, just the image of the operating system. When it starts to download, we'll look at that. It's a .iso file. You want to make sure you get an .iso file. So just the operating system image. So click that. Ubuntu has similar things, the labels, and Just download the recommended version. Kali is optimized for penetration testing or ethical hacking, and but it has other nice features too. I really like it for just some of the general operating stuff there. They have good things. In the background, it's built off the same thing as Ubuntu. So in the background, it's almost like Ubuntu, and it's a different front ground, a different foreground on it. But whichever one, when it goes to download, make sure it's a .iso file. It has the ISO extension. That's the format for operating systems. And these are big files, 3.7 gigabytes, so it's going to take a moment to download. They are really, really large files because it's an entire operating system. I only downloaded it to skip past that part, but you just start downloading it and give it time. I think most people in the modern world have good internet connections, right? If you don't have a great connection, coming to Ivy Tech is a good place to, like on a Friday morning when nobody else is on campus and you have the entire internet going to yourself because you're the only person in the building. It's a good place to download stuff if you live in a place where it's inconvenient. Around here, a lot of people like on the side of the hill over past New Albany. The internet cable companies still haven't got cables run up the side of the hill, so people over there, people at the bottom of the hill and people at the top of the hill have great internet connections, but the people that live on the side of the big hills, a lot of them rely on satellite internet. So if you need to download 3.7 gigabyte file from a satellite connection, that's going to take a moment. Coming up to Ivy Tech on like a Friday morning when nobody else is here, it'll be a lot quicker. But anyway, once you get it downloaded, downloads, you'll have that .iso file, have all the stuff, and then we can just load it in there. So we'll create a new virtual machine. Usually we would install operating systems from a disk, DVD disk. If you had something really, really small, I guess a CD would work, but CDs usually didn't hold enough information to hold a whole operating system. Might need several CDs to do that. Install it later, that's a really advanced option. So you want to use the installer disk image file, which has ISO right there. And just browse to the one that you want to install. So I have this one I downloaded earlier this morning. And yeah, if you're starting out into, you're first starting out into learning IT, probably not a bad idea to have several machines. You can see I have the one from this morning, I can make another one. So it's going to be Linux on the second one. Is it a Windows system, a Linux system, something else? So it's going to be Linux. And this one couldn't automatically detect it. When you go to install the Ubuntu machine, it'll probably recognize immediately that you're installing Ubuntu. Yeah, it didn't know what it was, so it just tried to assume that I was trying to install Ubuntu. It's like, oh, you want Linux, you probably want Ubuntu. Ubuntu and Kali were both made with the Debian system. So if you do Kali or any of them, you can see the different list here. If you do Kali, it's 10.x, and you just choose 10.x, and there's not many 32-bit machines left. I say they haven't completely gone away, but you probably have a 64-bit machine. Just choose the one appropriate for your system. So the Debian 64-bit machine. And next, and otherwise it's the same. I need to rename this because Kali in class, because I'm not sure if we're going to wait to go through all the menus. We're just going to hit a few key points for our next. So give it a name if you want to, which is very, very useful to help identify what it is. And that's the name of the machine. So like the name of the computer. Where is it going to be stored at? I'm just going to leave it in the defaults. Down that for different folders. That's not too much of a problem. How much space do you want to use on it? You might want to, depending on your hard drive, you might want to give it more space. The default's 20 gigabytes, isn't very much. So you might want to give it more, but remember it does share the same hardware. So if you give the virtual machine more storage space, you're taking it away from your other operating system. We can't create storage space out of nowhere. So choose a good balance there. And the default of splitting it up into multiple files is usually a better option, because then it can scatter it around the hard drive and doesn't have to take it all from the same place. Say ready to create it, and when you hit finish, it should show up on the list here. So then it shows up on the list, and we have to give it the first run. So when we give it the first run, we'll get to the installer. This is a tip from VMware. Sure, I didn't read what the tip was, but I've seen all the tips in VMware before. So first time you might want to actually read those tips. They're useful little tips and tricks for learning it. And I use a graphical install, and the message went away too quick. There was a little bubble up here that said, that was pointing out that my Windows system has a mouse right now. So if I need to do stuff, I need to come over here and click on this. And now that bubble to return to your computer, press Control-Alt. So it is a separate machine, but I only have one keyboard here and one mouse plugged up. So they have to share the keyboard and mouse right now. Graphical install works for Kali. On Ubuntu, I don't think you have options. I think you only have the graphical install. There's pictures in the lab manual. You walk through those, can't choose the defaults. Yeah, for the first one, going through and choosing defaults is probably good for everything. You'll know this process, what language is it in. It looks different, but does everybody remember setting this up on your Windows machine? First time you started up? Like, what language are you in? Where do you live at? What time zones probably coming up in very, very shortly? What's the local internet connection? All of that stuff that you've seen setting up a machine before. I made some notes. If you want to do Kali Linux, Ubuntu is really straightforward. I couldn't remember. I didn't think there was a lot of cybersecurity people in here this semester. If you are in cybersecurity, when people on the team call, Kali Linux might be a better one. And the lab this week says Ubuntu, but if you want to do a different Linux distro, install whatever Linux distro you want. Is anybody already a Linux user? So, I was gonna say use something new. So like in the spring, there was somebody that he was a big Linux user, so I just asked him to do a new one. We went through the list and we found, like on my picture where there was lots of branches, instead of choosing from over there at the end, we went back to where it was just like a completely different trunk of the tree. So that he was still learning something new. If you're already a Linux user, maybe try a different system than you normally use for virtual machines. You run it on the virtual machine. Yeah, defaults up to defaults all the way through, and it'll ask them about install bootloader on Kali, and it defaults to the option no. But if you do click no there, it will say that you have to have a bootloader. So then it asks the question again. So you kind of have to ask yes on that one, and the message it shows says that it's asking, I'll give this a name, all that stuff that we're used to. It sounds like it's going to erase stuff, but it's going to erase stuff on the new virtual machine that you just installed, not your actual machine. So if you see something like that on a different distro, it's like, okay, doing this stuff is going to erase this, that, or whatever. Remember, that's on your new virtual machine that doesn't have anything to erase. It just can't get rid of the warning message. So you just walk through the steps, whatever they are. I'm going to cancel out of this. Can I just close? I'm going to delete it. Yeah, power off that machine. And it's a virtual machine, so notice that to shut it down, instead of close, it was a power off button. A completely fake machine. So I'm going to go back in there now and poke around on the one I made this morning. So we created a open a virtual machine. So here's the one I installed this morning. Like pretty quick. I was cooking breakfast at the time, so like I started it, went upstairs, was cooked my lunch, came back down, clicked, and it was ready for a couple things that I was clicking through. So I clicked through those. Then 5 minutes later, I came back to the computer, clicked on it a couple more times, and it was only about 15 minutes to get the whole thing up and going. So now when I start this up, it's booting up a little bit different. So it's on here. I hope I don't mess up at all. It's a following up message. To get that stuff out of the way. So notice that it's booting up like the very first time. So I wasn't expecting it to take that long. Oh, there it goes. Zoom call is probably slowing it down. Well, it's, yeah, a fake machine, you think of it that way. So it's running on our system. So generally, it'd probably be a good thing to put on another desktop, right? And under our desktop button, we create a new desktop. And great. I'll do it this way. Control Alt Tab. Alt Tab. Can't remember how you drag that to the other desktop. Oh, there it is. Windows tab. Then we get all the options, and then I can just take that and drag it over to the other desktop. So there's one Windows machine, and then Windows key, Control, and right and left arrows switch between those. So we're going to maximize that. Then there's a Linux machine and Windows Control left. If you're on a Linux machine, you do have to move your mouse down to like the taskbar or something so you can get back to the Windows hotkeys. Otherwise, you have the Linux hotkeys. It's a different system. But on different desktop, two different operating systems running, have different things going. I set this up this morning, so I'll just go ahead and log on here. But a different operating system, so if you've never used them, they're similar things, but it's going to be just slightly different than the one you're used to. Or there are a lot of versions that people took time to make them look almost identical to Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, whichever one you're used to using, Windows 11. It's going to look almost identical as sort of an introduction to Kali. So if you click around on your mouse, you don't notice any difference after switching back to Windows. So we see a lot of familiar stuff. We have our desktop, recycling bin, a file explorer. We can navigate through, see all of our stuff. Completely new folder. Excuse me. I have some cough drops over here. We do a lot more stuff in the terminal here. So like Kali Linux has a bash shell, I think. Echo, whatever shell we're using. Oh, a Z shell. So it has this terminal. PowerShell, like I've been using on Windows all semester, is available. Does come with Kali on Kali by default. There's some really, really nice advantages to PowerShell. It was made in the first decade of the 2000s versus all the others were made back in the late 1970s. And a whole lot of stuff changed between the 1970s and early 2000s. So there were some major upgrades there, and all of the different major operating systems were rewriting their terminals, and Microsoft released theirs first, and they did such a great job with PowerShell that Linux and Mac OS just decided to go with compatibility because they weren't going to do better than what Microsoft did. Every once in a while, Microsoft does things really, really well. Sometimes it's hard to are easy to lose sight of that because of all the other stuff Microsoft does. But PowerShell is one of the things they did really, really well. So our other ones use that, and we do things in the term, a lot of things in the terminal. We go back to the traditional one. I think that's what's in your thing. So LS to list out what files we have, all that stuff. We click around with this a little. I'm thinking about clicking around for about, so just kind of getting started. Maybe a good time for a break before that. That's not good to y'all. It's been about an hour. 10 minutes sound good. And then we'll click around for about half an hour, just looking at a different operating system. Has anybody used Kali before? You said you use Linux, but a different Linux, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something you want to get to know on, and virtual machines are incredibly useful. Now I can do whatever on this machine and control Windows left. Oh, oops, put my mouse way down here. Control Windows left, back on the Windows machine is nothing is affected over here. They're completely isolated from each other. So let's click around on that for a few minutes after the break, and I guess I have to go back over here to the stop screen share. Looks like it's 2 o'clock, so we'll get back to it at 2:10, and then just kind of click around, look at different software for a few minutes. Installers are very different on Linux. That's one of the big ones. We'll look at that in just a moment. Let's take that.